Marcus Bennett walked through the airport terminal with a small carry-on bag over his shoulder. He wore his favorite gray hoodie, comfortable jeans, and white sneakers. At 52 years old, Marcus had learned that comfort mattered more than impressing strangers. His salt and pepper beard was neatly trimmed, and his reading glasses hung from the neck of his hoodie. The airport was busy that Tuesday morning. Families rushed past him. Business people talked loudly on their phones. Marcus moved calmly through the crowd. He had made this trip from New York to Los Angeles hundreds of times. Flying had become as normal to him as drinking his morning coffee. Marcus reached his gate and sat down to wait. He pulled out his phone and checked his emails. His company, Tech Vision Solutions, was doing well. Very well, actually. The quarterly numbers looked strong. His assistant had sent him 3 messages about upcoming meetings. Marcus replied to each one with quick, simple answers. When the boarding call came for first-class passengers, Marcus stood up and joined the line. A young mother with 2 children smiled at him. He smiled back. An elderly couple moved slowly in front of him. Marcus waited patiently. There was no rush. He handed his boarding pass to the gate agent. The agent, a friendly man in his 30s, scanned it and said, "Have a great flight, Mr. Bennett." Marcus thanked him and walked down the jet bridge toward the plane. The airplane door was open. Marcus stepped inside. The cabin smelled like cleaning products and recycled air. Flight attendants stood near the entrance, greeting passengers. One of them, a woman with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, looked at Marcus as he entered. Her name tag read Jessica Crawford. She was in her mid-30s with sharp features and bright red lipstick. Her smile, which had been wide for the passengers before Marcus, faded when she saw him. "Can I help you?" Jessica asked. Her tone was not friendly. It was the voice someone uses when they think you are lost. "I'm fine, thank you," Marcus said politely. He started to move toward his seat. "Excuse me, sir," Jessica said, stepping slightly into his path. "Are you sure you're in the right section?" "This is first class." Marcus stopped. He had heard questions like this before. Too many times to count. He took a slow breath and pulled out his boarding pass. "Yes, I'm in first class. Seat 2A. Jessica took the boarding pass from his hand. She looked at it closely as if checking for signs it was fake. Her eyes narrowed. Finally, she handed it back to him. "Oh, okay then." She stepped aside but did not smile. Marcus walked to his seat and placed his bag in the overhead compartment. Seat 2A was a window seat in the second row. The leather seats were wide and comfortable. Marcus sat down and fastened his seatbelt. He pulled out his tablet, ready to do some work during the flight. Around him, other first-class passengers settled into their seats. Across the aisle in seat 2C sat a man in an expensive suit. He was probably in his 50s with gray hair and a Rolex watch that caught the light. Behind Marcus, a woman in designer clothes typed quickly on her laptop. In front of him, an older couple whispered to each other about their vacation plans. Jessica moved through the first-class cabin, greeting passengers. Marcus watched as she transformed. Her smile became warm and genuine. Her voice turned sweet and helpful. "Good morning. Can I get you some champagne before we take off?" she asked the man in the suit. "That would be lovely," he replied. "And for you, ma'am?" Jessica asked the woman in designer clothes. "Champagne? Orange juice?" "Champagne, please," the woman said without looking up from her laptop. Jessica brought them their drinks on a small tray. She even brought warm nuts in small bowls. She laughed at something the suited man said. She complimented the designer woman's bracelet. Then she came to Marcus's row. Her smile disappeared like someone had flipped a switch. "Do you need anything?" she asked flatly. "No offer of champagne. No warm nuts. Just those 4 words delivered like an obligation." "Could I have some water, please?" Marcus asked. Jessica's jaw tightened slightly. "We'll be serving drinks after takeoff." "I understand," Marcus said. "Just water would be fine whenever you have a moment." Jessica walked away without responding. Marcus noticed but said nothing. He had dealt with worse. Much worse. When you grew up as a black kid in foster care moving from home to home, you learned to recognize prejudice in all its forms. Sometimes it was loud and obvious. Sometimes it was quiet and subtle, hidden behind professional smiles and policy excuses. More passengers boarded. The economy section filled up behind the first-class cabin. Marcus could hear the sounds of people finding their seats, stowing bags, and settling in for the 5-hour flight to Los Angeles. A young woman came down the aisle. She looked like a college student, maybe 20 or 21 years old. She had long black hair and wore a university sweatshirt. She struggled slightly with her carry-on bag. The suited man across from Marcus didn't look up. The designer woman behind him didn't offer to help. Marcus stood up. "Need a hand with that?" The young woman looked relieved. "Oh, yes, please. Thank you so much." Marcus helped her lift the bag into the overhead compartment. It was heavier than it looked, probably packed with textbooks. "Thank you," she said again, smiling warmly. "I'm Amy, by the way." "Marcus," he replied. "Safe travels." Amy continued to her seat in the economy section. Marcus sat back down. Jessica had watched this entire interaction from the galley. Her expression was unreadable, but her body language was tense. As more passengers boarded, Jessica continued her pattern. She was kind and attentive to some passengers. She was cold and dismissive to others. Marcus wasn't the only one receiving poor treatment, he noticed. An elderly South Asian man was questioned about his seat assignment. A young Latino couple was told to hurry up and sit down. Meanwhile, white passengers received nothing but smiles and assistance. The plane filled up. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their departure time and weather conditions in Los Angeles. Flight attendants moved through the cabin, checking seatbelts and making sure bags were properly stored. Jessica came by Marcus's row one more time. She didn't ask if he needed anything. She just glanced at his seatbelt to make sure it was fastened, then moved on. When she checked the suited man's seatbelt, she asked if he was comfortable and if he needed an extra pillow. The plane pushed back from the gate. The engines hummed to life. Marcus looked out the window as they taxied toward the runway. New York grew smaller below them. The city where he had built his empire from nothing. The city where he had lived in his car while starting his company. The city where he had signed his first $1 million contract. Now his company was worth billions. He employed over 3,000 people. He had been featured in Forbes, Fortune, and the Wall Street Journal. He had met presidents and prime ministers. He had donated millions to charities and scholarships. But none of that mattered to Jessica Crawford. She saw a black man in a hoodie and made her decision about who he was and what he deserved. The plane lifted off the ground. Marcus felt the familiar sensation of gravity pulling him back into his seat. They climbed higher into the sky. The buildings below became tiny. The cars looked like toys. Marcus opened his laptop. He had work to do. Presentations to review, emails to answer, a business empire to run. He would not let Jessica's behavior ruin his day. He had learned long ago that the best response to prejudice was success. And dignity. Always dignity. But in the economy section, Amy Chen had witnessed everything. She had seen how Jessica treated Marcus compared to other passengers. She had noticed the cold tone, the lack of service, the subtle but clear discrimination. Amy pulled out her phone. She opened her camera app and set it to video mode. She positioned it carefully, making sure it had a clear view of the first-class section. If Jessica continued this behavior, Amy would make sure the world saw it. Sometimes, Amy thought, people needed to face consequences for their actions. Sometimes the truth needed to be recorded and shared. The plane leveled off at cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign turned off. Jessica began her drink service, and Amy's camera kept recording, capturing every moment of what would soon become one of the most viral videos on the internet. The plane had been in the air for 30 minutes. The morning sun streamed through the windows. Most passengers had settled into their routines. Some read books. Others watched movies on their screens. A few slept with small pillows tucked under their heads. Marcus worked quietly on his laptop. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as he reviewed a presentation for an upcoming board meeting. The numbers were good. His company had exceeded projections again this quarter. He made a few notes in the margins of the digital document. Jessica pushed the drink cart down the aisle. The cart rattled slightly as it rolled over the airplane floor. She stopped at each row in first class, asking passengers what they wanted to drink. Her voice was cheerful and bright. "What can I get for you, sir?" she asked the man in the expensive suit. "We have champagne, wine, beer, spirits, soft drinks, coffee, tea, and juice." The man ordered a scotch on the rocks. Jessica poured it carefully, adding exactly 2 ice cubes. She placed it on a napkin on his tray table. "Enjoy," she said warmly. At the next row, she offered the designer woman the full list of drinks. The woman asked for a glass of white wine. Jessica served it with a smile and a small packet of crackers. Then Jessica reached Marcus's row. Her expression changed immediately. The warmth vanished from her face. Her shoulders stiffened. "What do you want?" she asked. "No, please." No polite list of options. Just those 4 words spoken like an inconvenience. Marcus looked up from his laptop. "May I have some coffee, please?" "Black, no sugar." Jessica didn't write it down. She just stared at him for a moment. "We're running low on coffee." "That's fine," Marcus said calmly. "Whatever you have is good." "I'll see what I can do," Jessica said. She moved the cart forward without serving him anything. Marcus watched her serve the passengers behind him. An older couple both got coffee. The man received his first with cream and sugar on the side. The woman got hers with a warm smile and a cookie. Jessica definitely was not running low on coffee. Marcus said nothing. He returned to his work. Years of experience had taught him that confronting prejudice in the moment rarely changed anything. It usually just made situations worse. He had learned to document, to stay calm, and to let his success speak louder than any argument. But in economy class, Amy's phone camera captured everything. The difference in treatment was obvious. Amy felt her heart beat faster as she watched. She had studied social justice in college. She had read about discrimination and implicit bias, but seeing it happen right in front of her was different. It was real and raw and wrong. 10 minutes passed. Jessica made her way back through the cabin with a coffee pot. She refilled the coffee for passengers who wanted more. She stopped at every row except Marcus's. When she walked past him, she looked straight ahead as if he didn't exist. Marcus raised his hand slightly. "Excuse me, could I still get that coffee?" Jessica stopped. She turned slowly. Her face showed clear annoyance. "I told you we were running low." "I can see you have some in that pot," Marcus said politely. He kept his voice level and calm. Jessica's jaw tightened. She walked back to Marcus's seat and poured coffee into a cup. But instead of placing it on his tray table like she had done for other passengers, she held it out to him. Marcus had to reach up to take it from her hand. The cup was barely half full. "Cream or sugar?" Marcus asked. "All out," Jessica said flatly. She turned and walked away quickly. Marcus looked at his coffee. He could see the cream and sugar packets in Jessica's apron pocket. He took a sip of his coffee. It was lukewarm, probably from the bottom of the pot. He set it down and went back to his work. The man in the suit across the aisle had noticed what happened. His name was Robert Klein. He was a lawyer from Chicago traveling to Los Angeles for a client meeting. Robert had watched Jessica's behavior for the past 30 minutes. At first he thought maybe he was imagining things. But now it was undeniable. Robert caught Marcus's eye. He gave a small nod, a gesture that said, "I saw that." Marcus nodded back slightly, acknowledging the silent support. Another hour passed. Passengers moved around the cabin. Some went to the bathroom. Others stretched their legs. Jessica and another flight attendant prepared lunch service. The smell of heated food filled the airplane. Jessica came through first class with lunch trays. Each tray had a main course, a side salad, bread, and a dessert. The first-class meals looked much better than what economy passengers would receive. "Chicken or fish?" Jessica asked the suited man. "Fish, please," he replied. She served him with care, making sure his tray was positioned perfectly on his tray table. She offered him a hot towel to wash his hands. She asked if he wanted another drink. She moved to the designer woman. "Chicken or fish?" "Chicken, thank you." Again, Jessica was all smiles and attentive service. She made sure the woman had everything she needed before moving on. Then Jessica reached Marcus. She held both meal options in her hands. She didn't ask him which he preferred. She just placed the chicken option on his tray table. The tray hit the table hard, rattling the silverware. "Wait," Marcus said. "Could I have the fish instead?" Jessica's eyes narrowed. "This is what I'm giving you." Marcus felt his patience being tested, but he remained calm. "I would prefer the fish if it's available." "We might run out," Jessica said. "But you haven't served everyone yet," Marcus pointed out gently. "There should be enough." Jessica made a sound like a sigh mixed with a grunt. She grabbed the chicken tray back, not carefully. She returned a moment later with the fish. She practically dropped it on Marcus's tray table. Some of the sauce spilled over the edge of the plate. "Anything else?" she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "No, thank you," Marcus said. Jessica walked away. Robert Klein, the lawyer, leaned across the aisle slightly. That was completely unacceptable, Robert said quietly to Marcus. Marcus looked at him. It happens more often than you'd think. Have you thought about reporting her? Robert asked. I've learned that complaints rarely change anything, Marcus replied. But I appreciate your concern. Robert nodded. He felt uncomfortable now, aware of his own privilege. He had never been treated that way on a flight. No one had ever questioned whether he belonged in first class. No one had ever served him with contempt. His white skin had always been an invisible passport to respect. Marcus ate his lunch quietly. The fish was actually quite good despite Jessica's attitude. He ate slowly, thinking about the work waiting for him in Los Angeles. He had 3 meetings scheduled for tomorrow. One was with potential investors from Japan. Another was with his marketing team about a new product launch. The third was a charity event where his foundation would announce new scholarship programs. After lunch, Jessica collected the trays. When she took Marcus's tray, she noticed he had eaten everything. She seemed almost disappointed, as if she had hoped he would complain about the food. She took the tray without a word. The plane flew smoothly through the afternoon sky. The captain announced they would begin their descent into Los Angeles in about 90 minutes. Passengers started to prepare. Some organized their belongings. Others made trips to the bathroom before the seatbelt sign came back on. Marcus needed to use the restroom. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. The first-class bathroom was just a few steps away. He walked toward it. Jessica appeared suddenly, stepping into his path. "Excuse me, where are you going?" Marcus was surprised by the question. "To the restroom." "There's a restroom in the back of the plane," Jessica said. Marcus blinked. "But the first-class restroom is right here." "We prefer first-class passengers to use this one," Jessica said. Her arms were crossed. "I am a first-class passenger," Marcus reminded her. He tried to keep the frustration out of his voice. "I'm just telling you the policy," Jessica said. "I've flown this airline hundreds of times," Marcus said calmly. "I've never heard of such a policy." Jessica's face reddened. "Are you calling me a liar?" Several passengers turned to look. The confrontation was becoming public. Amy, in economy, stood up slightly to see what was happening. Her phone was still recording. Robert Klein stood up from his seat. "There is no such policy," he said firmly to Jessica. "I fly this airline every week. First-class passengers can use the first-class restroom. That's literally one of the benefits of first class." Jessica's face grew even redder. She was caught in her lie. "Fine," she said sharply. She moved aside, but not much. Marcus had to turn sideways to get past her. He went into the bathroom and closed the door. He stood there for a moment, taking deep breaths. His hands gripped the small sink. He looked at himself in the mirror. This was exhausting. After all his success, after all his achievements, he was still being treated this way because of the color of his skin. Marcus washed his hands and dried them. He opened the door and returned to his seat. Jessica was nowhere to be seen. She had retreated to the galley area. Robert looked at Marcus with concern. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Marcus said. "But thank you." "No one should be treated that way," Robert said. "Especially not on an airplane where we're all stuck together." "I appreciate that you spoke up," Marcus told him. Not everyone would. The two men talked quietly for a few minutes. Robert learned that Marcus lived in Los Angeles. Marcus learned that Robert practiced civil rights law. They exchanged business cards. Robert insisted that Marcus should report Jessica's behavior. The statement was measured and thoughtful, which only made people respect Marcus more. While Jessica was being torn apart online, Marcus was being praised for his dignity and grace. News analysts debated the incident on television. Some argued that Jessica's behavior was clearly discriminatory. Others tried to defend her, saying perhaps she was having a bad day. But those defenses were drowned out by the overwhelming evidence in the video. Civil rights organizations issued statements supporting Marcus and calling for the airline to take strong action. The NAACP released a statement saying the incident demonstrated the need for better training and accountability in the airline industry. By midnight, the video had been viewed 50 million times. It had been shared by hundreds of thousands of accounts. News articles about it had been read millions of times. The story dominated the news cycle. Jessica Crawford's career was over. She knew that now. The video had destroyed her reputation completely. The airline would fire her. No other airline would hire her. Her face was recognized by millions of people as a symbol of racism. Marcus sat in his home office late that night, still reading comments and articles. His wife Angela brought him a cup of tea. "How are you feeling?" she asked gently. Marcus sighed. "Honestly, I'm exhausted. I just wanted to fly home. Instead, this has become a national conversation." "Maybe that's a good thing," Angela said. "Maybe some good can come from this." Marcus nodded slowly. "Maybe. I want to make sure this leads to real change, not just temporary outrage." "You'll figure it out," Angela told him. "You always do." Marcus looked at his phone one more time. A notification showed that the video had now reached 75 million views. The internet had spoken. Jessica Crawford had insulted the wrong person on the wrong day, and now the whole world was watching. The next morning, Marcus woke to find his story on the front page of every major news website. The video had now been viewed over 100 million times. It had become one of the most viral videos of the year. His phone had hundreds of missed calls. Messages filled his email inbox. His assistant had compiled a list of interview requests from every major news program in America. Good Morning America, The Today Show, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and dozens of others. Everyone wanted to talk to him. Marcus made himself coffee and sat in his kitchen. The morning sun came through the windows. Outside, he could still see news vans parked on his street. This was his life now, at least for a while. He called his core team for a meeting. His publicist, his lawyer, and his chief of staff all arrived at his house within an hour. They sat around his dining room table with laptops and notepads. "We need a strategy," his publicist Sharon said. She was a sharp woman in her 40s who had guided Marcus through several public situations before. "The public is on your side, but we need to direct this energy toward something productive." His lawyer, David, nodded. "The airline has already suspended the flight attendant. My sources tell me they're planning to fire her. But that's not enough. We should push for broader changes." Marcus listened carefully. "I don't want this to be just about destroying one person's life. Yes, Jessica was wrong. Yes, she should face consequences. But there are thousands of Jessicas out there. I want to change the system that allows people like her to act that way." His chief of staff, Maria, was already typing notes. "So we're talking about policy changes, training programs, accountability measures?" "Exactly," Marcus said. "I want to use this moment to create lasting change in the airline industry." While Marcus planned his response, the internet continued its investigation into Jessica Crawford. People found more of her social media posts. They discovered she had been reported for similar behavior before, but those complaints had been dismissed. Former passengers came forward with their own stories of being treated poorly by her. One black woman posted on Twitter, "Jessica Crawford was my flight attendant last year. She made me switch seats because another passenger felt uncomfortable sitting next to me. I filed a complaint and nothing happened." Another person shared, "I watched her refuse to serve a Muslim family on my flight. She said they were making other passengers nervous. I was disgusted but didn't know what to do." The pattern was clear. Jessica had been discriminating against passengers for years. The airline had received multiple complaints but had not taken serious action. Now the company was facing the consequences of its inaction. The airline's stock price dropped 3% when the market opened. Investors were worried about boycotts and lawsuits. The company's CEO called an emergency meeting with the board of directors. By noon, the airline released a longer statement. The CEO appeared in a video message looking serious and concerned. "I want to personally apologize to Mr. Bennett and to all of our passengers who have experienced discrimination while flying with us. What happened on Flight 447 was completely unacceptable and does not represent our values. Effective immediately, we are terminating the employment of the flight attendant involved. Additionally, we are launching a comprehensive review of our policies, training programs, and complaint procedures. We are committed to ensuring that every passenger feels safe, respected, and valued when they fly with us." The response got mixed reactions. Some people appreciated the swift action. Others felt it was too little, too late. Many pointed out that the airline only acted because the video went viral. What about all the incidents that weren't caught on camera? Major news networks aired segments about racial profiling in travel. Experts discussed implicit bias and how it affects customer service. Former flight attendants called in to share their experiences and observations. One retired flight attendant told CNN, "There's definitely bias in how some crew members treat passengers. I've seen it throughout my career. Airlines give training, but it's usually just checking boxes. Real change requires accountability and consequences. Celebrities continued sharing the video and expressing outrage. Some went further and announced they would no longer fly with that particular airline. A famous comedian posted a video saying, "I fly first class all the time. Nobody ever questions if I belong there." That's called privilege. Marcus Bennett is a billionaire and still got treated like he didn't deserve to be there. That's racism, plain and simple. By afternoon, the hashtag #DarkJusticeForMarcus had been used over 2 million times. It was joined by "Throng You Fire Jessica Crawford," which trended after the airline announced only that she was suspended. People wanted confirmation that she was actually fired. Other hashtags emerged too. Share your story. Encourage people to post their own experiences with discrimination while traveling. Thousands responded. Black passengers shared stories of being questioned about their tickets, being asked to move seats, or being treated with suspicion. Latino passengers described being asked for extra identification. Muslim passengers recounted being removed from flights. Asian passengers talked about being stereotyped and insulted. The stories poured in. It became clear that Marcus's experience was not unique. It was part of a much larger pattern. 3 days after the video was posted, Marcus gave his first interview. He chose to speak with a respected journalist known for thoughtful conversations about race and society. The interview would air on national television and stream online. Marcus wore a suit for the interview. He sat calmly across from the journalist, a woman named Patricia Moore, who had been covering civil rights issues for 20 years. "Mr. Bennett, thank you for speaking with us," Patricia began. "The video of your flight has now been viewed over 150 million times."
"How are you doing?"
Marcus took a breath. "I'm okay, Patricia. This has been overwhelming, but I'm managing. Walk us through what happened on that flight. What were you thinking during those 5 hours?" Marcus described the experience in detail. He spoke calmly without anger. He explained how he had remained quiet during most of it, because confrontation rarely helped. He talked about the pattern of microaggressions and outright discrimination. What hurt most, Marcus said, was not just being treated poorly. It was watching how warmly she treated other passengers. The contrast was so obvious. It made me feel invisible as a human being. Patricia nodded. "You're a billionaire, a successful entrepreneur, a philanthropist. Does it surprise you that you still face this kind of treatment?" "No," Marcus said honestly. "Money doesn't protect you from racism. Success doesn't either. I could have walked onto that plane wearing a sign that said I'm a billionaire, and it wouldn't have mattered. Jessica Crawford saw my skin color and made assumptions. What do you want to come from this?" Patricia asked. Marcus leaned forward. "I want real change, not just one flight attendant being fired. I want airlines to take discrimination seriously. I want better training. I want passengers to be able to report incidents without fear that nothing will happen. I want accountability at every level." "Some people are calling for passengers to boycott the airline," Patricia said. "What's your position on that?" "I understand the anger," Marcus replied. "But boycotting might hurt workers who had nothing to do with this. Instead, I want to work with the airline to create better systems. I'm announcing today that my foundation will donate $10 million to create a comprehensive anti-bias training program for the airline industry." The statement was measured and thoughtful, which only made people respect Marcus more. While Jessica was being torn apart online, Marcus was being praised for his dignity and grace. News analysts debated the incident on television. Some argued that Jessica's behavior was clearly discriminatory. Others tried to defend her, saying perhaps she was having a bad day. But those defenses were drowned out by the overwhelming evidence in the video. Civil rights organizations issued statements supporting Marcus and calling for the airline to take strong action. The NAACP released a statement saying the incident demonstrated the need for better training and accountability in the airline industry. By midnight, the video had been viewed 50 million times. It had been shared by hundreds of thousands of accounts. News articles about it had been read millions of times. The story dominated the news cycle. Jessica Crawford's career was over. She knew that now. The video had destroyed her reputation completely. The airline would fire her. No other airline would hire her. Her face was recognized by millions of people as a symbol of racism. Marcus sat in his home office late that night, still reading comments and articles. His wife Angela brought him a cup of tea. "How are you feeling?" she asked gently. Marcus sighed. "Honestly, I'm exhausted. I just wanted to fly home. Instead, this has become a national conversation." "Maybe that's a good thing," Angela said. "Maybe some good can come from this." Marcus nodded slowly. "Maybe. I want to make sure this leads to real change, not just temporary outrage." "You'll figure it out," Angela told him. "You always do." Marcus looked at his phone one more time. A notification showed that the video had now reached 75 million views. The internet had spoken. Jessica Crawford had insulted the wrong person on the wrong day, and now the whole world was watching. The next morning, Marcus woke to find his story on the front page of every major news website. The video had now been viewed over 100 million times. It had become one of the most viral videos of the year. His phone had hundreds of missed calls. Messages filled his email inbox. His assistant had compiled a list of interview requests from every major news program in America. Good Morning America, The Today Show, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and dozens of others. Everyone wanted to talk to him. Marcus made himself coffee and sat in his kitchen. The morning sun came through the windows. Outside, he could still see news vans parked on his street. This was his life now, at least for a while. He called his core team for a meeting. His publicist, his lawyer, and his chief of staff all arrived at his house within an hour. They sat around his dining room table with laptops and notepads. "We need a strategy," his publicist Sharon said. She was a sharp woman in her 40s who had guided Marcus through several public situations before. "The public is on your side, but we need to direct this energy toward something productive." His lawyer, David, nodded. "The airline has already suspended the flight attendant. My sources tell me they're planning to fire her. But that's not enough. We should push for broader changes." Marcus listened carefully. "I don't want this to be just about destroying one person's life. Yes, Jessica was wrong. Yes, she should face consequences. But there are thousands of Jessicas out there. I want to change the system that allows people like her to act that way." His chief of staff, Maria, was already typing notes. "So we're talking about policy changes, training programs, accountability measures?" "Exactly," Marcus said. "I want to use this moment to create lasting change in the airline industry." While Marcus planned his response, the internet continued its investigation into Jessica Crawford. People found more of her social media posts. They discovered she had been reported for similar behavior before, but those complaints had been dismissed. Former passengers came forward with their own stories of being treated poorly by her. One black woman posted on Twitter, "Jessica Crawford was my flight attendant last year. She made me switch seats because another passenger felt uncomfortable sitting next to me. I filed a complaint and nothing happened." Another person shared, "I watched her refuse to serve a Muslim family on my flight. She said they were making other passengers nervous. I was disgusted but didn't know what to do." The pattern was clear. Jessica had been discriminating against passengers for years. The airline had received multiple complaints but had not taken serious action. Now the company was facing the consequences of its inaction. The airline's stock price dropped 3% when the market opened. Investors were worried about boycotts and lawsuits. The company's CEO called an emergency meeting with the board of directors. By noon, the airline released a longer statement. The CEO appeared in a video message looking serious and concerned. "I want to personally apologize to Mr. Bennett and to all of our passengers who have experienced discrimination while flying with us. What happened on Flight 447 was completely unacceptable and does not represent our values. Effective immediately, we are terminating the employment of the flight attendant involved. Additionally, we are launching a comprehensive review of our policies, training programs, and complaint procedures. We are committed to ensuring that every passenger feels safe, respected, and valued when they fly with us." The response got mixed reactions. Some people appreciated the swift action. Others felt it was too little, too late. Many pointed out that the airline only acted because the video went viral. What about all the incidents that weren't caught on camera? Major news networks aired segments about racial profiling in travel. Experts discussed implicit bias and how it affects customer service. Former flight attendants called in to share their experiences and observations. One retired flight attendant told CNN, "There's definitely bias in how some crew members treat passengers. I've seen it throughout my career. Airlines give training, but it's usually just checking boxes. Real change requires accountability and consequences." Celebrities continued sharing the video and expressing outrage. Some went further and announced they would no longer fly with that particular airline. A famous comedian posted a video saying, "I fly first class all the time. Nobody ever questions if I belong there." That's called privilege. Marcus Bennett is a billionaire and still got treated like he didn't deserve to be there. That's racism, plain and simple. By afternoon, the hashtag #JusticeForMarcus had been used over 2 million times. It was joined by "Frong you fired Jessica Crawford," which trended after the airline announced only that she was suspended. People wanted confirmation that she was actually fired. Other hashtags emerged too. Share your story. Encourage people to post their own experiences with discrimination while traveling. Thousands responded. Black passengers shared stories of being questioned about their tickets, being asked to move seats, or being treated with suspicion. Latino passengers described being asked for extra identification. Muslim passengers recounted being removed from flights. Asian passengers talked about being stereotyped and insulted. The stories poured in. It became clear that Marcus's experience was not unique. It was part of a much larger pattern. 3 days after the video was posted, Marcus gave his first interview. He chose to speak with a respected journalist known for thoughtful conversations about race and society. The interview would air on national television and stream online. Marcus wore a suit for the interview. He sat calmly across from the journalist, a woman named Patricia Moore, who had been covering civil rights issues for 20 years. "Mr. Bennett, thank you for speaking with us," Patricia began. "The video of your flight has now been viewed over 150 million times."
How are you doing?
Marcus took a breath. "I'm okay, Patricia. This has been overwhelming, but I'm managing. Walk us through what happened on that flight. What were you thinking during those 5 hours?" Marcus described the experience in detail. He spoke calmly without anger. He explained how he had remained quiet during most of it, because confrontation rarely helped. He talked about the pattern of microaggressions and outright discrimination. What hurt most, Marcus said, was not just being treated poorly. It was watching how warmly she treated other passengers. The contrast was so obvious. It made me feel invisible as a human being. Patricia nodded. "You're a billionaire, a successful entrepreneur, a philanthropist. Does it surprise you that you still face this kind of treatment?" "No," Marcus said honestly. "Money doesn't protect you from racism. Success doesn't either. I could have walked onto that plane wearing a sign that said I'm a billionaire, and it wouldn't have mattered. Jessica Crawford saw my skin color and made assumptions. What do you want to come from this?" Patricia asked. Marcus leaned forward. "I want real change. Not just one flight attendant being fired. I want airlines to take discrimination seriously. I want better training. I want passengers to be able to report incidents without fear that nothing will happen. I want accountability at every level." "Some people are calling for passengers to boycott the airline," Patricia said. "What's your position on that?" "I understand the anger," Marcus replied. "But boycotting might hurt workers who had nothing to do with this. Instead, I want to work with the airline to create better systems. I'm announcing today that my foundation will donate $10 million to create a comprehensive anti-bias training program for the airline industry." The audience in the studio applauded. Patricia smiled. "That's a generous and constructive response. This isn't about revenge," Marcus said. "It's about progress. Yes, Jessica should face consequences for her actions, but let's also acknowledge that she operated in a system that allowed this behavior. We need to change that system." The interview continued for another 30 minutes. Marcus talked about his own journey from poverty to wealth. He shared other experiences with discrimination throughout his life. He emphasized that his experience on the plane was not unique. "Countless people face this every single day," Marcus said. "They just don't have a camera recording it. They don't have a platform to share their story. This isn't about me. It's about everyone who has ever been made to feel less than human because of their race." When the interview aired that evening, it was watched by 15 million people. Clips from it were shared millions more times on social media. Marcus's measured, thoughtful response earned him even more respect. The airline responded immediately to Marcus's interview. The CEO called him personally. "Mr. Bennett, we would be honored to partner with your foundation on this training program. We're also interested in discussing other ways we can improve our practices." "I'm willing to have that conversation," Marcus told him. "But I want real commitment, not just public relations." "You have my word," the CEO said. Jessica Crawford, meanwhile, was officially fired from the airline. The termination notice was delivered to her apartment. She sat alone, reading the letter that ended her career. The letter cited her behavior on Flight 447 and noted previous complaints that had been documented in her file. Jessica felt the full weight of what she had done. Her life had changed completely in just 3 days. She couldn't leave her apartment without being recognized. Her family had stopped speaking to her. She had received countless hateful messages. Some were death threats. She recorded an apology video in her apartment. She sat in front of her phone camera, her face tear-stained and makeup running. "My name is Jessica Crawford," she began, her voice shaking. "I want to apologize to Marcus Bennett for my behavior on the flight. I was wrong. I treated him terribly, and there's no excuse for it. I let my own biases and assumptions guide my actions. I'm deeply sorry." She paused, wiping tears from her face. "I've lost my job. I've lost my reputation. I've lost everything. But that's not what matters. What matters is that I hurt someone. I made him feel unwelcome and disrespected. That was wrong." Jessica posted the video, but the response was not sympathetic. Most comments said the apology came too late. Others said she was only sorry because she got caught. Some people felt the apology was more about her than about Marcus. A popular social media commentator analyzed the apology. "Jessica Crawford is crying about losing her job. But where was this remorse when she was treating Marcus Bennett like garbage? This is the apology of someone facing consequences, not someone who genuinely understands what they did wrong." Back in his home, Marcus saw Jessica's apology video. His wife Angela watched with him. "Do you forgive her?" Angela asked. Marcus thought about it. "I don't know yet. Forgiveness isn't something I feel pressured to give. She wasn't just rude. She was discriminatory. She's done this to others before me. An apology video doesn't erase that. But you're not celebrating her downfall either," Angela observed. "No," Marcus agreed. "I don't take joy in anyone's suffering. But I also won't pretend that her tears change what she did or who she was on that plane." The story continued dominating news cycles. Think pieces were written about racism, privilege, and accountability. Universities added the incident to their syllabi for courses on race relations. The video became a teaching tool for discussions about bias. Amy Chen, the college student who recorded the video, was praised for her citizen journalism. News outlets interviewed her. She explained that she felt compelled to document what she was seeing because it was so clearly wrong. "I'm studying journalism," Amy told one reporter. "We learn about the responsibility to document injustice. When I saw what was happening to Mr. Bennett, I knew it needed to be recorded. People need to see the reality of discrimination." Robert Klein, the lawyer who had spoken up on the plane, was also interviewed. He talked about the responsibility of bystanders to intervene. "I wish I had done more," Robert said. "I spoke up a couple times, but I could have done more. We all have a responsibility when we witness injustice." The incident sparked a broader conversation in America. It became more than just a viral video. It became a cultural moment that forced uncomfortable conversations about race, assumptions, and how society treats people differently based on their appearance. 2 weeks after the video went viral, Marcus sat in a conference room at the airline's headquarters. He was surrounded by executives, human resources directors, and diversity consultants. The table was covered with reports, statistics, and proposed policy changes. The airline's CEO, Richard Morrison, opened the meeting. "Mr. Bennett, we're grateful that you're willing to work with us on this. We know we've failed in many ways. We want to do better." Marcus looked around the room. He saw genuine concern on some faces. On others, he saw nervousness. They were worried about their company's reputation and their bottom line. But Marcus didn't care about their motivations. He cared about results. "Let's be clear about something," Marcus said. "I'm not here to make your company look good. I'm here to create real change. If we're going to partner on this, I need commitment." "Real commitment." "Not just words for a press release," Richard nodded. "We understand. Tell us what you need." Over the next 2 hours, Marcus outlined his vision. His foundation had been working with civil rights experts, psychologists, and former airline employees to develop a comprehensive training program. "First, we need mandatory bias training for all employees," Marcus explained. "Not the basic online course that people click through. Real training. In-person sessions that make people uncomfortable. That force them to confront their own biases." The head of human resources, a woman named Linda Chen, took notes. "How often would this training occur?" "Quarterly for the first year," Marcus said. then twice a year after that. And it needs to be good training. We'll work with experts who understand how implicit bias works and how to combat it. What else? Richard asked. Marcus continued. Second, we need a better system for passengers to report discrimination. Right now, if someone files a complaint, it goes into a black hole. Nobody follows up. There are no consequences. That needs to change. He pulled out a document his team had prepared. We propose an independent review board. When a passenger files a discrimination complaint, it goes to this board. The board investigates. They have the power to recommend discipline, retraining, or termination. The airline commits to following their recommendations. Linda looked concerned. That's giving a lot of power to an outside board. That's the point, Marcus said firmly. You've proven you can't police yourselves. Jessica Crawford had multiple complaints against her. Nothing happened until a video went viral. That's not accountability. That's damage control. The room was quiet. Richard finally spoke. You're right. We agreed to the independent board. Marcus wasn't finished. Third, we need transparency. The airline will publish an annual report on discrimination complaints. How many were filed? How many were investigated? What actions were taken? The public deserves to know. That could be damaging to our reputation, the chief marketing officer said. Marcus looked at him. More damaging than another viral video? More damaging than passengers boycotting your airline? Transparency builds trust. Hiding problems doesn't make them go away. Richard held up his hand to silence his marketing officer. We'll do it. Annual transparency reports, the meeting continued. Marcus presented more ideas. Training for passengers about their rights. Cultural sensitivity workshops for employees. A scholarship program to increase diversity in airline management. Requirements for diverse hiring panels. By the end of the meeting, the airline had agreed to everything. Richard signed a commitment document that Marcus's lawyer had prepared. The airline would invest $20 million over 3 years to implement these changes. Combined with Marcus's $10 million contribution, it was a $30 million commitment to change. This is just the beginning, Marcus said as the meeting ended. Other airlines need to adopt these standards too. This needs to become industry-wide. Richard shook Marcus's hand. We'll reach out to other airlines. We'll encourage them to join this initiative. Marcus left the building and got into his car. His assistant, who had been waiting, handed him his phone. You have messages from 3 other major airlines. They want to meet with you about implementing similar programs. Marcus smiled slightly. Change was happening. Real change, but not everyone was happy about it. Conservative news commentators criticized Marcus's approach. One popular talk show host said, Marcus Bennett is using one bad experience to push a radical agenda. He's forcing companies to waste money on sensitivity training instead of just moving on with his life. Another commentator wrote an article titled The Dangers of Cancel Culture. The article defended Jessica Crawford and argued that she had been punished too harshly. One mistake has destroyed this woman's entire life. Where is the mercy? Where is the forgiveness? Marcus expected this backlash. He had lived through enough public moments to know that some people would always defend the status quo. But the majority of public opinion remained on his side. A poll showed that 78% of Americans believed the airline had been right to fire Jessica Crawford. 65% supported Marcus's training initiatives. Even among people who typically criticized political correctness, many agreed that Jessica's behavior had been unacceptable. Jessica herself had gone quiet. After her apology video received mostly negative responses, she deleted all her social media accounts. She moved out of her apartment to stay with a friend in another state. She couldn't find work. Every job application was rejected once employers Googled her name. Some people felt sympathy for her. They created a fundraising page to help her pay her bills. It raised $12,000 before being shut down after receiving complaints. Other people argued that Jessica deserved support and a chance at redemption. A religious organization reached out to Jessica, offering counseling and support. They believed in forgiveness and second chances. Jessica accepted their help. She began attending therapy sessions to understand her own biases and behaviors. Marcus learned about Jessica's situation through news reports. A journalist asked him if he felt any responsibility for what had happened to her life. I feel responsibility for creating change, Marcus answered, but I don't feel responsible for the consequences of her actions. Jessica made choices. She discriminated against passengers repeatedly. She was caught on camera. The world responded, "Those are her consequences to manage." "Do you think she deserves a second chance?" the journalist pressed. Marcus paused. "I think everyone deserves the opportunity to learn and grow, but a second chance doesn't mean avoiding consequences. If Jessica genuinely understands what she did wrong and works to change, I hope she finds peace. But that's her journey, not mine." 3 months after the incident, Congress invited Marcus to testify about discrimination in commercial aviation. He sat before a committee of senators and representatives sworn in to tell the truth. Senator Patricia Williams, a black woman from Illinois, led the questioning. "Mr. Bennett, thank you for being here. In your experience, how widespread is discrimination in air travel?" Marcus answered clearly. "Senator, my experience is one example of a systemic problem. Since my video went viral, I've received over 50,000 messages from people sharing their own stories. Black passengers, Latino passengers, Asian passengers, Muslim passengers, Jewish passengers, passengers with disabilities, LGBTQ passengers. The stories are heartbreaking and they're everywhere." He shared specific examples that people had sent him. A black doctor removed from a flight after offering to help a sick passenger, because crew members didn't believe he was really a doctor. A Muslim woman asked to remove her hijab before boarding. A Latino family questioned about their immigration status on a domestic flight. "These aren't isolated incidents," Marcus continued. "This is a pattern of discrimination built into how some airline employees view certain passengers." Senator Williams nodded. "What do you recommend we do about it?" Marcus presented his proposals. Federal requirements for bias training, independent oversight of discrimination complaints, financial penalties for airlines that don't address discrimination, protection for employees who report discriminatory colleagues. "We also need data collection," Marcus added. "Airlines should be required to track discrimination complaints by category. Race, religion, disability, gender identity. We need to understand the scope of the problem before we can fully solve it." The testimony lasted 3 hours. Other witnesses spoke too. A law professor who studied discrimination, a civil rights attorney who had filed multiple lawsuits against airlines, a Muslim activist who had been removed from flights 3 times despite doing nothing wrong. The hearing received significant media coverage. Several senators promised to draft legislation based on Marcus's recommendations. Whether the legislation would pass was uncertain, but at least the conversation was happening at the highest levels of government. Back in his office, Marcus continued working on multiple initiatives. His foundation had partnered with 6 major airlines now. All of them were implementing the training programs. Some were going even further, creating diversity councils and hiring chief inclusion officers. He also launched a public awareness campaign. Billboards in major airports displayed messages like, "Respect every passenger and fly without bias." Social media ads educated travelers about their rights and how to report discrimination. Marcus hired Amy Chen, the college student who had filmed the original video, to work as a consultant for his foundation. Her job was to help create educational materials about documenting discrimination and knowing when to intervene. "You did something brave on that flight," Marcus told Amy at their first meeting. "You saw injustice and you documented it." "That takes courage," Amy smiled. "I just did what felt right. I'm glad it led to something bigger." Robert Klein, the lawyer who had spoken up on the plane, joined forces with Marcus too. Robert's law firm began offering free legal services to passengers who experienced discrimination and wanted to file complaints or lawsuits. "Your voice mattered that day," Marcus told Robert. "Too many people see discrimination and stay silent. You didn't." "I wish more people would speak up," Robert said. "Bystanders have power. We just need to use it." 6 months after the incident, Marcus received an unexpected letter. It was from Jessica Crawford. She had written it by hand on simple notebook paper. The letter was long. Jessica wrote about her journey since being fired. She talked about therapy and the painful process of confronting her own racism. She described growing up in a predominantly white town where casual racism was normalized. She explained how she had never examined her assumptions until they destroyed her life. "I know saying sorry doesn't fix what I did," Jessica wrote. "I can't take back how I treated you and others, but I want you to know that I'm doing the work. Real work. I'm reading books about racism. I'm attending workshops. I'm volunteering with organizations that fight discrimination. I'm trying to become a better person." She ended the letter, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know that your experience changed me. It forced me to look at myself honestly. That's been the hardest thing I've ever done. Thank you for using what happened to create change. I hope someday I can contribute to that change too. Marcus read the letter 3 times. He showed it to Angela. What are you going to do? Angela asked. I don't know, Marcus admitted. Part of me wants to ignore it. Part of me appreciates that she's trying to change. You don't owe her anything, Angela said gently. But maybe acknowledging her effort doesn't cost you anything either. Marcus thought about it for several days. Finally, he wrote a brief response. Jessica, I received your letter. I appreciate that you're doing the work to understand and change your behavior. That takes courage. I hope you continue on this path. Real change is hard but necessary. I wish you well in your journey. He didn't promise forgiveness. He didn't offer friendship. But he acknowledged her efforts. Sometimes Marcus thought that was enough. The story that had started with a 5-hour flight had transformed into a movement. Airlines were changing policies. Employees were receiving better training. Passengers felt more empowered to report discrimination. None of it was perfect. Discrimination still happened. But progress was being made. Marcus continued his work knowing that change takes time. One viral video had started a conversation. Now it was up to everyone to keep that conversation going and turn it into lasting action. 1 year after the video went viral, Marcus stood at a podium in Washington, D.C. He was addressing a conference on racial equity in transportation. The room was filled with airline executives, civil rights leaders, government officials, and journalists. A year ago, I boarded a flight wearing a hoodie, Marcus began. I was judged not by my character or accomplishments, but by assumptions about what a man in a hoodie must be. That experience, captured on video, sparked a national conversation. Today I want to talk about what we've achieved and what work remains. He clicked to the first slide of his presentation. It showed statistics about the implementation of bias training across the airline industry. 12 major airlines have now adopted comprehensive anti-bias training programs. Over 200,000 airline employees have completed this training. Early data shows a 42% reduction in discrimination complaints at airlines using our program. The audience nodded approvingly. Marcus continued. We've established independent review boards at 8 airlines. These boards have investigated over 3,000 complaints in the past year. They've recommended disciplinary action in 38% of cases. Employees know there are real consequences now. That matters. He clicked to another slide showing passenger satisfaction scores. Interestingly, customer satisfaction has increased at airlines implementing these changes. When passengers feel respected and valued, they have better experiences. This isn't just about doing what's right morally, it's good business. After his speech, reporters gathered around Marcus. They asked about the anniversary of the video and how his life had changed. The video made me a symbol, Marcus said. But I'm just one person who happened to be recorded. My goal has always been to represent everyone who faces discrimination without cameras present. That's still my focus. A reporter asked about Jessica Crawford. Have you spoken to her since exchanging letters? No, Marcus said simply. I responded to her letter acknowledging her efforts to change. But we don't have an ongoing relationship. That's not necessary for either of us to move forward. Do you know what she's doing now? Another reporter asked. Marcus had heard through various sources what Jessica's life looked like now. She had moved to a small town in Oregon. She worked at a non-profit organization that helped formerly incarcerated people find jobs. She spoke occasionally at workshops about bias and accountability, sharing her story as a cautionary tale. I've heard she's trying to do better work in the world, Marcus said carefully. I hope that's true. Redemption is possible for people who genuinely want to change. But that's her story to tell, not mine. The original video, which had been viewed over 300 million times, had become part of popular culture. It was shown in college classrooms, corporate training sessions, and diversity workshops. Media studies professors analyzed how the video had spread so quickly and why it had resonated so deeply. Several documentaries featured the incident. One focused on Marcus's journey from foster care to Billionaire. Another examined the broader issue of racial profiling in commercial travel. A third looked at viral videos and their impact on social change. Amy Chen, now graduated from college, had become a respected journalist. She had written a book about citizen journalism, and the responsibility of bystanders. The book featured her experience filming Marcus's flight as a central case study. "I was just a college student with a phone," Amy said in interviews. "But I realized that everyone with a camera has the power to document injustice. We just have to be willing to press record and share what we see." Robert Klein, the lawyer who had spoken up on the plane, had launched a non-profit legal organization. It provided free representation to people who experienced discrimination while traveling. His organization had won several significant cases, resulting in policy changes and financial settlements. "That flight changed my perspective," Robert told a group of law students. "I realized I had been a silent witness to injustice too many times in my life. Now I use my privilege and my skills to fight back. That's what allies should do." The airline where Jessica had worked had undergone major changes. Richard Morrison, the CEO, had made diversity and inclusion a core part of the company's mission. The airline published detailed annual reports about discrimination complaints, investigations, and outcomes. Other airlines had followed suit, not wanting to be the next company featured in a viral discrimination video. The entire industry had shifted, even if slowly and imperfectly, but discrimination hadn't disappeared. It had just become more subtle in some cases. Marcus continued to hear stories from passengers who faced bias. A black businesswoman questioned about whether her expensive purse was real. A Latino family followed by security through an airport. A Muslim man subjected to additional screening on every flight. Marcus knew the work was far from over. He testified before Congress again, this time advocating for stronger federal protections against discrimination in travel. He met with international aviation organizations to spread the training programs globally. His foundation expanded beyond airlines. They developed similar programs for hotels, restaurants, and retail stores. The goal was to address discrimination wherever customers encountered it. Marcus also continued running his tech company. Tech Vision Solutions had grown even more successful over the past year. Some people wondered if the publicity from the video had helped his business. "If anything, it's been a distraction," Marcus told his business partner. "But it's been a necessary distraction. Making money means nothing if we're not making the world better." He used his wealth increasingly for social causes. Beyond the anti-discrimination initiatives, he funded scholarships for students from foster care. He invested in businesses owned by people of color. He donated to organizations fighting for criminal justice reform. "Money is just a tool," Marcus often said. "What matters is what you build with it." On the anniversary of the flight, Marcus received a surprise. The small airline startup that Amy had been traveling on that day had renamed one of their planes the Marcus Bennett in his honor. The plane featured a livery with the words "Respect every passenger" painted along the fuselage. Marcus was touched by the gesture. He attended the plane's unveiling ceremony at Los Angeles International Airport. News cameras captured him standing in front of the aircraft, humbled by how one difficult experience had led to so much change. "This plane will fly hundreds of thousands of miles," Marcus said at the ceremony. "It will carry millions of passengers. I hope everyone who sees it remembers that respect and dignity aren't privileges. They're rights. Every passenger deserves to be treated with humanity." The crowd applauded. Young people held up signs supporting Marcus's work. Parents brought their children to meet him, wanting them to see an example of using pain to create progress. Later that day, Marcus did something he hadn't done since the incident. He boarded a flight. He deliberately wore the same gray hoodie and jeans he had worn a year earlier. He flew first class again, this time on the airline where Jessica had worked. The flight attendants recognized him immediately. They were warm and professional. They treated him with respect. But Marcus wondered if it was genuine change or just because they knew who he was. During the flight, Marcus observed how the crew treated other passengers. He watched an elderly black couple being served with kindness. He saw a young Latino man in a hoodie receive the same attention as business travelers. He noticed a Muslim woman in a hijab being greeted with a smile. Maybe it was working. Maybe people were learning. Or maybe this crew had simply been trained well. Marcus couldn't know for certain. But it was better than what he had experienced a year ago. When the flight landed, the head flight attendant made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special passenger on board today. Mr. Marcus Bennett has been instrumental in helping our airline and industry become more inclusive and respectful." On behalf of everyone here, thank you, Mr. Bennett, for turning a painful experience into positive change. The passengers applauded. Some stood up. Marcus felt tears in his eyes. He hadn't expected this recognition. He waved slightly, acknowledging the applause but feeling uncomfortable with the attention. As passengers deplaned, many stopped to thank Marcus personally. They shared their own stories of discrimination. They told him his work mattered. They said they felt safer traveling now because of the changes he had helped create. An elderly black woman, probably in her 70s, stopped in front of Marcus. She took his hand in both of hers. "I've been flying for 50 years, she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've been treated terribly more times than I can count. But I've seen real change this past year. You did that. Thank you for not staying silent. Thank you for using your voice." Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you for sharing that. It means everything to know this work makes a difference." He left the plane feeling hopeful but realistic. 1 year had brought significant changes, but decades of work remained. Bias and discrimination were deeply rooted in society. Changing hearts and minds took time. That evening, Marcus sat in his home office. Angela brought him dinner on a tray, knowing he would work late. "How was the flight?" she asked. "Better," Marcus said. "Noticeably better." "The crew was excellent. I didn't feel any of what I felt last year." "That's progress," Angela said. "It is," Marcus agreed. "But I keep thinking about all the people who don't have cameras recording them, who don't have platforms to share their stories, who face discrimination and have no recourse." "You can't save everyone," Angela reminded him gently, "but you've helped create systems that can. The training programs, the review boards, the transparency requirements. Those will outlast any viral video." Marcus nodded. She was right. Systemic change mattered more than individual stories, even viral ones. His phone buzzed. It was a message from a stranger. "Mr. Bennett, I just wanted to thank you. I'm a young black man who flies for work. Last week, a flight attendant was rude to me. But when I filed a complaint, the airline actually investigated. They apologized and said the employee would receive additional training. That would never have happened before your video. Thank you for making airlines accountable." Marcus saved the message. He had hundreds like it. Each one reminded him why this work mattered. Over the following months, Marcus continued his advocacy. He spoke at universities about bias and discrimination. He met with business leaders about creating inclusive workplaces. He advised other companies facing discrimination scandals. Jessica Crawford's name occasionally appeared in articles about the incident, but she had largely faded from public attention. She continued her work at the nonprofit in Oregon. She had given a few interviews about her journey, expressing genuine remorse and commitment to doing better. Some people forgave her, others never would. Marcus found himself in the first category, though he had never told her directly. He believed people could change if they truly wanted to. Jessica seemed to be trying. 2 years after the incident, federal legislation passed requiring airlines to implement standardized anti-bias training and establish independent complaint review systems. The law was nicknamed the Bennett Act by supporters, though Marcus had asked them not to name it after him. "This isn't about me," Marcus said when the law passed. "This is about everyone who has ever been discriminated against while traveling. This is about creating a society where people are judged by their character, not their appearance." The law wasn't perfect. Enforcement would be challenging. Some airlines would do the minimum required. But it was progress. Real, measurable progress. Marcus reflected on how far things had come. A painful 5-hour flight had transformed into a national movement. A viral video had sparked legislative change. One person's experience had validated millions of others' stories. He thought about Jessica Crawford sometimes. He wondered if she had truly changed or if she was just trying to rebuild her reputation. He hoped it was genuine change. The world needed people to learn and grow, not just be punished and discarded. But he also thought about all the Jessicas who had never been caught on camera. The people who discriminated every day without consequences. The systems that protected them. Those were harder to change than one flight attendant's behavior. Marcus's work continued. The Bennett Foundation expanded its programs internationally. Airlines in Europe, Asia, and South America adopted the training methods. The conversation about travel discrimination became global. 5 years after the incident, Marcus published a book. It was called The Hoodie and the Boardroom: Race, Class, and Respect in Modern America. The book explored how discrimination persisted regardless of wealth or status. It shared stories from hundreds of people who had faced similar experiences. It offered solutions for creating more equitable systems. The book became a bestseller. It was used in college courses. It sparked discussion groups and book clubs. It reminded people that the work of creating an inclusive society was never finished. In the final chapter, Marcus wrote about that flight. He described in detail what he had felt during those 5 hours. The anger, the hurt, the exhaustion of having to remain calm and dignified while being disrespected. He wrote about watching the video later and seeing himself through others' eyes. "I looked small in that video," Marcus wrote. "Not physically, but spiritually. I had tried to make myself invisible, hoping that would prevent more harassment. That's what discrimination does. It makes you shrink. It makes you question your own worth. It makes you tired." But then he wrote about what came after. The support from millions of strangers, the changes in policy and practice, the movement that emerged from one moment of caught-on-camera bias. "Pain can be transformed into purpose," Marcus wrote. "My experience on that flight was painful, but refusing to let that pain be wasted, using it to create change, that gave it meaning. That's what we all can do. Take our pain and build something better." The book ended with a call to action. If you witness discrimination, speak up. If you experience it, report it. If you have power, use it to create more equitable systems. Change doesn't happen by itself. It happens because people refuse to accept injustice. Marcus's story became part of a larger narrative about race in America. It was cited alongside other viral moments that had sparked conversations and changes. It was studied as an example of how social media could drive accountability. But for Marcus, it remained personal. It was the flight where he had been judged by his hoodie instead of his humanity. It was the experience that had reminded him that success didn't shield anyone from prejudice. It was the moment that had pushed him to do more, be more, and fight harder for a world where respect was universal. Years later, when people asked Marcus about that flight, he always said the same thing. "It was one of the worst experiences of my life, but it led to some of the most important work of my life. I wouldn't choose to go through it again, but I'm grateful for what came from it." And every time he flew, Marcus wore that same gray hoodie, not as a statement or a provocation, but as a reminder, to himself and to anyone watching, that a person's worth isn't determined by their clothes. That dignity isn't reserved for those who look a certain way. That respect should be given freely, without conditions. The video of that flight would exist forever on the internet. Future generations would watch it and hopefully learn from it. They would see how discrimination looked in 2025. They would study how one viral moment sparked systemic change. They would understand that progress required both outrage and action. Marcus hoped they would also see resilience, the ability to face injustice with grace, the choice to transform pain into purpose, the commitment to making things better for those who come after. That was his legacy, not the video, not the viral moment, but what he built from it, the systems he changed, the people he helped, the conversations he started, the world he made slightly better, one policy and one person at a time.